Hey everyone, welcome to the BioBreakthroughs podcast. I'm your host, Jared Taylor. Joining me today is the Chief Medical Officer of Currax Pharmaceuticals, Dr. Michael Kyle. How are you today?
I'm good, Jared. Thank you for having me on.
I'm excited. Let's dive right in. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself, and then we'll talk more about Currax.
Sure. So I'm a physician by training. I had a large medical practice in Chicago for about 12 years. And during that time, unfortunately, I joked that I had patients, about 80% of my patients were either overweight, obese, or smokers, or a combination thereof. And in the early 90s, early 2000s, there just weren't a lot of great treatments for those types of patients. In 2007, I started slowing down my practice and started doing clinical research. And I was actually one of the original investigators, sub-investigators on a product called Contrave before it was approved. Actually, Mysimba is the name outside of the US, but it's bupropion and naltrexone. And so 2007, I helped conduct the studies on that product, and it was approved in the U.S. in 2013. I had left the research organization and gone to work for another pharmaceutical company. But in 2022, I had an opportunity to come back and meet up with my old friend Contrave and start working with that molecule again with my company now called Currax. And so that's sort of the background. Sometimes your profession or your life goes in full circles, right?
And what drives you every day? Like, obviously, it's cool to be able to work on something that has such an impact. Like, but what continues to drive you every day at this company?
Well, I think for me, the number of patients who are living with obesity, struggling with it every day, it's the true pandemic that just keeps growing and growing. And I think back to when I was practicing and the frustration that I had at that time of just trying to find ways to help patients. We didn't understand obesity very well. Physicians, healthcare providers, even to this day, are not trained well to treat obesity. I think back to my medical school years 25, 30 years ago, where I had more lectures on malpractice than I did on obesity. I had one lecture on medical malpractice. That's changed. It's gotten better. But we still are not at the point where we're treating this condition appropriately. It's not recognized universally, globally, as a disease. We're starting to get there, but we're not.
And when we talk more about this disease, can you talk about? I mean, we always hear about obesity, but can you talk about the different types of obesity? And like we kind of always hear, unfortunately, like a one size fits all for treatments too. So, what treatment works best with each type of obesity?
Well, obesity is defined with a single parameter really at this point, which is BMI of 27 or above with comorbid conditions or above 30. But it's the underlying cause of obesity that we really need to understand better and focus on. Dr. Acosta at the Mayo Clinic's done a lot of great work looking at different underlying causes. For example, he describes them as either hungry brain or hungry gut or slow burn or emotional eaters or emotional eating. And that's based on, those are the phenotypes that he's developed. If you think about our genetic makeup, and we're each very, very individualized, but if we put a person in a certain environment, they have a greater likelihood of being obese depending on their genetic makeup. So it's the combination of genetic makeup and environment that creates a phenotype. And so the phenotypes, as I described, those four, seem to be the four main ones that are driving a lot of obesity.
And I mean, we're always about, and more so than ever, right? Like our costs continue to go up with everything. When you look at like how can we tackle the obesity crisis in a cost-effective way?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing is that we have to acknowledge it as a disease. And then we have to understand, as you mentioned earlier, one size does not fit all. And if you think about the phenotypes in general, and you think about how that works, if you have someone who um, has hungry guts where the stomach empties the food that you ate very quickly. So the normal stretch receptors within the stomach are no longer stretched, and they send the signal to the brain, hey, you need to eat more food. GLP-1s work really great in terms of that. They slow down that so that motility of the gut. But there's also a central component to this, and that's where, for example, emotional eating comes into play. And emotional eaters, someone who has that phenotype, is someone who uh, there's some sort of trigger, whether positive or negative, that makes them want to eat something that's highly palatable, sweet, high carbohydrate foods, and it can override all the other phenotypes. But if we don't understand phenotypes, how they interact, then we just randomly select a medicine for the patient and put them on it. Now, the most expensive medicine may not be the right medicine for that patient. So to be cost effective, we have to understand the underlying cause of the disease. We have to acknowledge that it's a chronic, progressive, lifelong condition. We have to make sure that our patients are well educated on obesity, that they can't rely on social media to get their education about how they're going to fit into their suit for the next event or their dress for the next event. And we have to help our healthcare professionals better understand how to talk with and to educate and to advise patients in the best treatment for them.
One of the things I wanted to really dive in with you on was what can we learn from European countries and how they've addressed obesity? Because um, this is probably a stereotype, right? But when you look at people in Europe in general, like it seems like they have less of a maybe an obesity issue than we do over here. And I've had friends over there, and I tell them about how it seems like the U.S. has like we have an obesity problem, and it seems like I'm not saying they don't have it, but they've addressed it maybe better than we have. So that being said, what can we learn from them?
Yeah, so I think, unfortunately, I think they're catching up with us in some respects. I think that, obviously, obesity is it's skyrocketing. I think I saw some estimate the other day where 3 to 5 billion people will have be obese by 2035 or some ridiculous number like that. But I think that some European countries have been more willing to um, um, provide reimbursement. They obviously don't have the insurance system like we have, but provide reimbursement for many obesity medicines, including the GLP-1s. And there are some countries that have started a program, and for a year they allowed for coverage or reimbursement for all medications. The problem is at the end of the year when they reassessed everything, they realized that it was not sustainable from a cost perspective, that they had to figure out some better way of controlling the cost or managing the cost because it's not sustainable. Unfortunately, they changed their parameters. They changed what's allowed. Is the BMI now changes. You have to have a BMI of 40 before you can have a GLP-1 or greater than 35, depending on the country. So I think although they were advanced, they were ahead of us in terms of allowing for those treatments to be available. They didn't understand the total cost because of the number of patients that are looking for some sort of answer.
It's That's interesting that you think they're catching up too. I always applauded European countries for not allowing certain foods like over to be consumed over there versus here. Like the red dyes and all that stuff. It seems like this isn't. I don't have any affiliation with this company or anything, but I use this app called Yuka, Yuka at the grocery store, which lets me scan every piece of food and then assigns it a rating based on how many additives, both dangerous and non-dangerous, it has. Some have more sodium, but it's really changed my way. Like a lot of things that I was not to say that this is the end all app, right? But it's changed my way. How I used to consume this all the time, this type of yogurt, and this yogurt has 9 additives, 2 that are potentially harmful. and that was kind of eye opening to me. So now I always try to, I try to eat healthy, but even a step further than that, I want to make sure that everything's in the green when I use that app when I go shopping. So now I have my shopping list, and then it makes an alternative to go and do that, which is cool. So I definitely, whether it's that or something else, I just think it is tough though to get in that mindset of like I've been in that period where I haven't been eating healthy, and to your point, I mean that's why the GLP-1s are really like when it's like behavior change, right, and blocking out those thoughts of sometimes I wasn't hungry and I just wanted something else to eat. So it's really cool to see how they've evolved. Now, what I would also love to chat with you here today is why is the evolution of treatments for things like hypertension a good model for, I guess, how the obesity drug landscape will end up developing?
Yeah, hypertension is an interesting comparison. You can go back almost, probably over 100 years. There was actually treatments for hypertension then. They were not well tolerated for a lot of reasons. And then I think it was the 50s, early 60s, diuretics came out, and then there were calcium channel blockers and beta blockers and ACE inhibitors, and then the ARBs. And so there's been this evolution of different medications with different mechanisms of action because patients don't tolerate certain medicines or they're not effective in certain patients. And it's the same thing for obesity. What we have right now are drugs like Qsymia and phentermine topramate combination. They work a certain way within the brain itself. Then you have the GLP-1s that have sort of jumped on the market recently, and then you see combinations of GLP-1s and GIP drugs as well. And then you look at our product, Contrave, which again has been in the market for 10 years now, which is a fixed dose combination, works in two different areas of the brain. I see, sort of these three broad categories as the base, like hypertension, of diuretics, calcium channel blockers, and beta blockers. And it's going to continue to expand, and it has to expand just to make sure that we treat, all these patients that are living with obesity. Yeah.
What is, I guess, the most enjoyable part about your job today? Like that, I mean, I can tell, this is why I love doing video. I can tell the passion, right? That you're into this space. But this is separate from the what drives you question, right? Like, what do you really enjoy about kind of sinking your teeth into every day when it comes to, solving some big problems?
So I think, for me, having the opportunity and we're in 48 countries, so I'm all over the world, talking with healthcare professionals, talking with patients living with obesity, patients who have successfully treated their obesity, and helping them understand sometimes that it's a lifelong condition that they're going to have to manage. When you see or you talk with a patient who for years has struggled to lose weight, and no matter how many times they keep trying to lose weight, they lose it and they gain weight back, and then they actually overshoot their weight. So now they're heavier than they were before. And then they lose some weight and then they go back. And to see patients lose weight and maintain it and keep it off is just, absolutely amazing. And I'll tell you an interesting story. When I was still practicing, I had a patient who was well over 350 pounds, and tried everything to lose weight. We tried, even some of the older products that were on the market, Fen, in the 90s, those types of things, and could never lose weight. And before I left practice, we had continued to work on just behavioral changes and lifestyle changes and appropriate goals for him to lose weight. And his wife was actually one of my nurses in my practice, so they always had my phone number. And I got a text probably 3 years ago now, and it was a picture of a scale with 2 feet on the scale. And the text was, lots of screaming and yelling. Call Dr. Kyle. I finally achieved my goal weight. It took him 15, almost 20 years to get there, but he achieved it, and he had lost the weight slowly and gotten down there. You see that in your personal practice, and then you talk to these patients out there, and then you look at the number of patients every day that are diagnosed with obesity. That's what makes it worth it, just making that impact on patients.
That must be such a cool text for you to see too,
Yeah.
especially when I'm assuming maybe even I'm sure you have a close relationship with a lot of your patients, but even more so because his wife worked with you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, that's super interesting. Going back to the behavioral part, we had the founder of Noom come on a while back, right? We've also had the chief medical officer over there, and he was kind of echoing what you were saying, though. Like, one of the biggest problems that people run into too is they try to say we're going to go on a weight loss program, or I'm going to start working out, and then they go too far, and it's unsustainable. And that behavior change, like he goes, in order to make a change, you need to make little changes consistently over a period of time. Too many people, I don't know if you see this, but too many people try to make the big change, and then I always hear people say, I think it might have been like Tony Robbins or one of these people. Why are you counting when you say I haven't had anything unhealthy in 3 weeks? Because you're going to stop, right? Because then when you stop, you say, "Hey, I made it 3 weeks." Like, that was a pat on the back moment, right? Which, in some cases it can be. But I guess my last question for you is, how should doctors be talking about obesity with their patients? Like, how candid should they get?
So I always had the approach of when a patient walked into my office, I already knew what they weighed. My nurse put them on the scale, et cetera. They already know they're overweight. They already know that they're obese. Um, Doctors have to not be uncomfortable with saying, um, you have obesity. We need to find a way that's right for you to individualize your treatment, just like we would any other disease. Find a way that works for you, that is sustainable. We lay out a plan together. And if it's not working, we have options to change that plan. But it's that honest, direct conversation. Too many times it's the last 5 minutes of a well, maybe the last 2 minutes of an office visit where it's brought up because the doctor just really wants to get out of the room. They don't really want to talk about it. They don't know how to talk about it, et cetera. Patients are frustrated. No patient that walks into the office with obesity has not tried to lose weight at some point. And it's not that they failed, because I don't like to say they failed. They just haven't found the right treatment for them. And again, it goes back to, why is it so important to have all these different medicines like hypertension on the market? Because you need those options for those patients. You need to understand the underlying cause. And that's the work of phenotyping and the precision medicine that we're moving towards, just like we have for any other medical condition. We're getting there, but we're not there yet.
Super interesting. It'll be interesting to see how all this plays out. Um, and I'll just quickly, as a society, I guess we always um, you hear a term a lot, like body shaming and stuff, and I mean, I'm sure that does happen, but I also think, as maybe as the greater media also sometimes like celebrates like obesity to a degree. Like, I remember, I think it was Jillian Michaels made a comment about someone being obese, and they said that was body shaming, and but she wasn't saying it to like make fun of that person. She was saying like that person needs to take control of their health, right? Because they're obese. And it just seems like, as a society, amongst friends and family, we should maybe have those conversations, because at the end of the day, if someone is obese for an extended period of time, those complications, other health complications, can arise, right? So, I have one more question for you. Then I lied there. Um, how soon, like when someone, okay, maybe recognizes that they're obese, should they be going to seek treatment?
I mean, that's a tough question. It's obviously individualized, right? We know that it's a chronic progressive disease. If every year your BMI, and BMI is not a great measure for obesity, but it's sort of the best we have. You can use lots of other parameters. Um, every year your weight goes up, your BMI goes up. We should be looking at, like we talk about early diabetes or pre-hypertension. We should be looking at obesity the same way. We should be looking at interventions earlier than 27 in the comorbid condition. That doesn't mean pharmacologic treatment, but it means let's have an honest conversation. Let's look at the food you're taking in. Let's look at your behavior, your exercise, before you get to that point where it's triggering these other conditions. Obesity is the number one cause of type 2 diabetes and primary hypertension, and high cholesterol. All the let's treat the underlying cause of those. Let's do it early. Let's not wait till the condition develops or pre-diabetes develops. Let's look at pre-obesity or early obesity and sort of change the lexicon or change the descriptions of what obesity is.
You just ended on a great clip, by the way. That is picture perfect. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining me here today and sharing some thoughts. And thank you for all that you do, because it must be cool to be able to work on impacting a space, right, and people every day. So wishing you all the best of luck. Thanks so much. And hopefully we can chat again soon.
That's great. Thank you, Jared. Really appreciate the time.